Well, I guess to start, let's get into that transition from when I last saw you because same network, different show. And of course, there was a lot of talk about like your physique. Was the challenge always something you wanted to do? What was your reaction when you found out that you could possibly be on the show?
Well, it's crazy because I was familiar with the show. Like I had known about it, but I hadn't really watched like a full season to know the ins and outs of all of that stuff. At least before I had been approached about it. So what's funny about that is because when I was on Big Brother, I remember Joseph brought it up many a times. It was like,
Hmm.
man, we got to do the challenge together, man. And I was like, dude, I don't know if I can go through this again. Like being in the Big Brother house, like it's a lot on a person mentally and just in so many different ways. So I wasn't even sure that I wanted to go on another show where I could possibly have a similar environment. But then as I started to learn more about the show and the types of challenges that you would go through and the game that's being played, I was like, actually, I think that might be right up my alley. I think I might be able to excel here. So, and then once I started to learn that some of the folks from my season were going on, it just felt like a little bit more comforting, knowing that I would have some people that I would be riding with on the season. So I was excited for it, but I don't think that it was something like I had dreamed about beforehand.
Now, what I find interesting is you go back to Big Brother. I mean, to your credit, over the course of BB24, there aren't really a lot of times where you were like really in the line of fire. That changes immediately in the Challenge
Yeah.
USA 2 between you being a rookie, between you being on this green team, between, being part of this Big Brother alliance that winnowed down over the course of the season. I mean, I think except for one Hopper vote, you got votes every single time that you were
Yeah,
eligible for
for
elimination.
sure.
What was your reaction to that? How much did you have to pivot your strategy or intentionality once you found out, "Oh, no, they are looking at me"?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first time that I received like all those balls in the hopper, I was a bit surprised, but at the same time, I knew after that what was kind of happening, right? Like it sounded like, all right, the red team is looking to weaken the green team as much as possible. Now, did I consider myself the strongest male on the team? No, like I think Wes, with somebody who's won the challenge before many a times and been on the challenge with more experience, was the stronger competitor and probably the stronger game player. But he had relationships with the Bananas, with the Josh,
Hmm.
with Paulie, with John A. So he was protected in those situations. And I think they probably looked at me as like the next biggest threat just because of my size and whatnot. Like me and Fess, the tallest guys in the house, but I believe I was probably the heaviest, and I'm a rookie with no relationships with these folks. So it made sense. But as the time started to go through, I just tried to work as much as I possibly can because what you realize is there's like a small sliver of opportunity to try to build connections with people before that first vote. It's like you move in, the daily challenge is the next day, and then they're nominating people. And then the following day, they're voting. So it's like you have maybe 48 hours in the midst of a whole production cycle to try to talk to people about, saving your behind for the next Hopper vote. But it was tough, but at the same time, I understood it. I think they were just trying to get a big competitor out. And I feel like it was a little bit more flattering at times than it was, like a personal attack on me. Cause I was like, dude, I didn't do anything to rub anybody wrong. Like, I don't do that stuff. So it's got to be, they just want to get a competitor out. But
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, despite having your back against the wall, it did seem going into this individual portion, at least, that like there was so much talk about this Big Brother alliance that again got like sort of winnowed down a bit once the individual portion hit. How much of that was actually a thing? Because you have Tyler talking all the time about like Josh and Fessel are sort of with us, but they're clearly going to put the vets above us. Again, this group continues to shrink where it just seems like it's you, Tyler, and Alyssa versus the world. Was a Big Brother alliance truly something that was happening?
Uh, it didn't start off that way. No. I tell you what, it, and I get it from Josh and Fess's perspective, and even Paulie's perspective, that like when you have relationships with people from previous seasons you've been on, like that's a huge, huge weight on your decisions. So not knowing me, Alyssa, Amira, like you don't know whether you can trust us or not. You don't know how slimy we may play the game and all that sort of stuff. So I think they were kind of torn at first,
Hmm.
but I feel like they made their decision pretty clear to align with the vets at the beginning. So when I thought about Big Brother, like I would do some of the math in my head. I was like, okay, if you count Josh Fest and Paulie, we had 8 people who can all vote in the same direction. So in my head, I was like, I feel pretty good. I think if we just get everybody on the same page, we can really roll throughout the whole season. But that just never happened. And when it happened way too late. So I think like a Josh and a Fest, like me, Tyler, and Alyssa were really trying to work the vets to vote in a Sebastian to go up against Tyler, so that way we can keep everybody here and give Tyler the best chance of possibly coming back and not going up against me. And we wound up doing that. So it felt good to at least get that tiny victory. But the reality is that since we never had an opportunity to take out anybody from Survivor beforehand, and they were so locked in, they didn't vote against each other. That voting block was the reason why I was eliminated at the end of the day, and my ball was selected from the hopper. So it was tough, but I understand where everybody was coming from. Now, if I get another opportunity to go into that house, I mean, it's going to be a different situation because of the relationships I've built now. But we were on an island going in. There wasn't any Big Brother alliance until like really right before I left.
Yeah, and ironically enough, you were the show that wasn't on an island, and you were still on an island. So that was your own experience. I mean, talking about that most recent episode, we had so many people say, okay, now the game's individual. Here's how my individual strategy changes. Was that the case for you? What do you think changed the most for your own approach to the game once the teams were broken up?
I mean, I feel like for me, it opened everything up personally. I would agree with everybody because the team dynamic, it made you loyal to people that you were only loyal to because you had the same color jersey on, right? So I feel as though when you open the game up and it's just a bunch of black shirts out there, now you can politic with any and everybody, and you don't have this concern that, oh, I'm telling this person that I may want to target somebody on their team. No, there's no more teams anymore. So there's none of that information getting back to that person. And it's just purely based off of who you're closest with. So, and I felt pretty good about that. I just think at that point, so much damage had been done with the Survivor group and me and Tyler being so opposed to the direction that they were going in versus where we wanted to go, that I don't think they saw any value in keeping the both of us in the house. And it made sense.
So you face off in this elimination, which seems excruciating, I think would be a way to describe it. I mean, you see the peanut gallery being so frustrated time and time again with these things falling. I can't imagine how you were feeling undergoing it for 3 hours. Talk to me through, even though you don't really, know the show that well, a very different challenge elimination.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I mean, I had started to binge watch a bunch of challenge seasons before I got on.
Gotcha.
And I did the same thing with Big Brother too, like I just kind of study certain seasons to get prepared. So I mean, I think I had seen a decent amount of like eliminations before, but there's no way to expect or prepare for that. Like it was grueling. So one, I think it was conflicting because you're going against your closest ally in the house, so it's like, damn, like I want to win, but at the same time, I'm going to be conflicted afterwards, just knowing that I eliminated my closest friend. But at the same time, it kind of helped because I don't know if you kind of noticed, but during the challenge, during the elimination, we were kind of encouraging each other throughout the entire time.
Yeah.
We were like, dude, like, come on, finish strong, don't give up, all that sort of stuff, because we both wanted one of us to finish because it was so long. I mean, me and Tyler both still have bruises on our hips from the harness that was pulling. It was just so grueling. And 3 hours is understand. It felt like way longer than that, but yeah, it was a crazy challenge. It required a lot of patience, a lot of persistence, and just a lot of faith that at some point they would stay up and that you wouldn't topple them over. But I'm definitely proud of the way things ended, and I'm glad they just ended in general. So
yeah. When it comes to the edit of the show, last thing I want to ask, after watching your story play out here, what's one thing that we didn't get to see as an audience from your time in the Challenge USA 2 that you wish we saw?
well, I definitely say Me dislocating my shoulder after the working the poles challenge. Yeah, that happened. Yeah, this shoulder was out of place after I fell into the water. Yeah, so
So that makes a lot of sense as to why Bananas is like, bring Monty into the elimination with me.
yeah. So you can kind of infer that, you can extrapolate that from the experience, but yeah, I think it was something that I wasn't sure I would be able to come back from. I had gotten an X-ray right afterwards just to make sure it was still in place. Doctors confirmed it was fine, but after you dislocate your shoulder, it's not as strong as beforehand. So swimming, I was compromised on. I could tell any sort of like hanging challenges. I just didn't want any parts of that. But thankfully, I didn't have anything that relied upon me like just dangling from my right arm. And it continued to gain strength from there. And then another thing I'll mention too is that challenge, the daily challenge where Bananas decided to block me from
Mhm.
winning and Tori blocked Michaela. We had it was like a scene out of Star Wars or something with like me being Luke Skywalker and then this guy's like Darth Vader or something. It's just like he throws his disc. It's like game on, and I'm like, really? And then we're just bickering back and forth while it's happening, and then even afterwards, we had like a 10-minute screaming match. And
Mm.
honestly, it wasn't personal. Like it was a lot of competitive fire. And afterwards, like me, Bananas, Tori, like it was like a mutual respect that we had because they didn't know that that side of me was there. So once they saw that, they were like, look, like let's call it a peace agreement that we can kind of run temporarily because we don't want that to happen again. We don't need that sort of environment. So yeah, that those are some of the things that happened that you guys probably are wondering, like, oh, like how did this impact the game? Like it was a huge impact on the game.